Hello everyone, this is the second tutorial video for Next.js. Today I'm going to show you how to use dynamic routing system as well as server-side rendering by using Next.js. You may wonder what is dynamic routing. We learned static and nested routing, which is user could set up routes with creating directories and files within the pages further. But what if the user wants to create some pages which need to be changed dynamically? For example, let's think of you want to load a user's profile page. The profile page's structure will be the same except user's unique data such as ID, nickname, and so on. What if you have a million users on your website and then you need to create a million user pages for each user? However, Next.js provides dynamic routing and it will make your work much easier as a developer. Let's create a user's profile page by using dynamic routes. The further structure is same as static or nested routes, except the specific file or directory names are within a bracket. So you can simply add brackets to the specific directory or file name. For example, let me create users folder, and I'd like to make this file with the dynamic route. So the file name should be within a bracket. And then to implement dynamic routing in the Next.js, you need to import useRouter who from the next/router. And it allows to access the query parameters from the URL. The page will take user's ID as a parameter. So let me import useRouter from next/router. And create I need to create a variable to use useRouter function, and this constant should be taken from the query. So that's it. So let me okay, so as I created before, the page should be users, or and the inside the query, if I put the cabin, you can see now it's Kevin's profile page, and this value can be number, or as I typed earlier, can be just text, something like this. So it's how you can implement dynamic routing very easily. And also, you could give extra key and values by user question marks for the query. For example, let me simply just add it's called, then and if I want to take the city's value as a parameter, I could simply put the address name as it's still in the user's directory, and cabin should be the main parameter and city category. And you could see right there. Lastly, you could create multiple dynamic route segments work the same way. The page directory can be just anything. For example, let me put here, just simply set the directory name as a user, and then let's move into the directory. And the page's URL should be from this part with any number or any text, but still this page will work like that. So if you want to make any route name to put it in, you could create dynamic further name. Okay, so let's talk about server-side rendering. As I mentioned before, one of the biggest reasons why developers use Next.js is because Next.js provides server-side rendering. If you want to know more about server-side rendering concept, please check my previous blog or my previous video. And in a nutshell, server-side rendering has advantages for search engine optimization and fast first page rendering for clients. When it comes to the server-side rendering of Next.js, there are two main options, which are static site generation and server-side rendering. Static site generation is also called pre-rendering because you generate all the HTML at build time, and it makes the application very simple because you generate a bunch of HTML files, then upload them to a storage bucket or a static host, and they can be delivered with very high performance for loading the application. However, there are some drawbacks of static site generation. First of all, the data could not be responsive because it's built before rendering, and it means the page couldn't dynamically be changed. Second, if you have too many SSG pages, it makes your program very slow. Imagine you have a million pages and it should be pre-rendered before showing their initial page to client. They're going to wait quite long time to see the page. As a result, SSG is well suited for data that doesn't change often and for sites that have a relatively low level of total pages. A good example would be a blog or an article because it might have a few hundred pages only, and those pages likely won't change on a daily basis. Now, let's see how SSG is implemented in the actual code. When we visit the page, the contents of the page are stored on the server. It means we need to fetch data from the database or API. I created several JSON files in the public directory to show the examples as below. So cars.json will be the main component, and the car JSON file has their own ID, color, and image, key, and value. Also, I created a cars directory and index.js, which could be the main index page of the car route. Now we're ready to implement SSG for the application. The function named getStaticProbes is used for SSG in the Next.js. When you build your application, Next.js will automatically call this getStaticProbes function, and data is saved from database or API. Then the result from the request will be passed to the main function as a probe for the initial loading. So the return value will be the car data, which is fetched from those JSON file. You can use those data of JSON file because the main function received the JSON data from the getStaticProbes as a prop. Because we are working with the dynamic routes, there's one more thing you have to do. Next.js has no way of knowing how many pages you actually have associated to a dynamic route in order to pre-render all the car IDs. So Next.js needs to know those IDs in advance. To provide this information, you could use getStaticPath function. It is very similar to getStaticProps function, but need to return path and fallback keys and values. Path object contains an array with every route for this dynamic URL, and it will be 3 routes with this example, which was Ford, Lamborghini, Tesla. The default value of fallback key is false. If fallback is false, then any path not returned by getStaticPath will result in fallable pages. Now we are ready to test our code. Don't forget to run your application beforehand, and then let's try to connect to the page, which could be Ford. Now you could see it read the data from the Ford.json file. The ID would be Ford, color would be blue, and the images from this URL. And let's connect to Tesla as well. You still see it's changed. Although it doesn't really look different to just typical React application, it's already fully rendered HTML page, and it makes initial loading much faster than CSR, especially if you build and also if you connect with the server. Do you remember I mentioned that SSG is originally pre-rendered during build time? Then what if the page shows different content every time when a client visits that page? If you visit the profile page of the Instagram, the structure seems the same, but the contents are different because we all use different ID and we have different following or follower list. Because it's impossible to build every second, Next.js provides server-side rendering, which is rendered each page at request time, not at the build time. As a result, server-side rendering ensures the end user will always get the latest data from whatever your data source happens to be, but it could be slower than SSG. Now, let's see how you can implement server-side rendering function in Next.js. It's very easy to do that if you already know how to use getStaticProps. The only change is that the name of the function from getStaticProps to getServerSideProps. And you don't even need to use getStaticPath because it doesn't pre-render during build time. It just rendered at loading time.